Hi, this is Gerald. My name is Gerald Patterson, and this is part two of my my speech about growing, or the growth of the human spirit, and introduce my book. It's called The Growth of the Human Spirit, and today I'd just like to give you there's like 250 quotations or so in my book, but I'd like to give you just a sampling of quotations in my book. Now remember, this is not my wisdom. This is the wisdom of the people that I quote. Starting off in the category of strength, growing in strength. Oh, do not pray for an easy life, rather pray to be stronger men and women. Philip Brooks. Courage, growing in courage. Always do what you are afraid to do. Ralph Waldo Emerson. And look fear in the face. You must do the thing which you think you cannot do. Eleanor Roosevelt. Goodness, growing in goodness. Unless we live up to the spirit of goodness, we live down to the level of mental slavery and moral mediocrity. Ralph Sockman. Love, growing in love. It is impossible to love without giving. Richard Bronstein. And it is only those who do not love that go empty in this world. Robert Hugh Brown. Wisdom, growing in wisdom. I do not think much of a man or a woman who is not wiser today than they were yesterday. Abraham Lincoln. And greatness. Growing in greatness. It is a grand mistake to think of being great without goodness. Benjamin Franklin. Now my next quote is from an unlikely source. It's from Jim Carrey. As you probably know, Jim Carrey is a movie actor and a comedian, and he's very, very talented. But for me, he is not an example of a good role model. But I did find an interesting quote from Jim Carrey. And before I give that quote to you, I'd like to give you one of his weird jokes. Jim Carrey was speculating about what hell might be like, and he said maybe hell is just having to listen to our grandfathers breathe through their noses when they're eating sandwiches. Now a serious quote from Jim Carrey. As you know, Jim Carrey is rich and famous, and this is what he says. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it is not the answer. So what is the answer? Well, Jim Carrey, I believe, had 2 failed marriages, so apparently marriage was not the answer for him. And Jim Carrey, after that, I believe he partnered for 5 years with a former Playboy bunny. But they broke up also, so apparently that was not the answer. And Jim Carrey did a bungee jump off a high bridge, but apparently that was not the answer. So if Jim Carrey came up to you and said, I have everything and I've done everything, but it is not the answer. So what is the answer? How would you answer Jim Carrey? Well, if Jim Carrey came up to me with the same question, what is the answer? I would tell him I don't have all the answers, but I would refer him to a quotation from C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, as you may know, is a Christian writer. And C.S. Lewis says, if I find in my mind a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Now, the last chapter of my book is called Growing in Faith and Hope. In this last chapter, I share some of my favorite reassuring quotes from Jesus from the Bible. You've probably heard these quotes before. Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life." And Jesus says, "These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full." Jesus says, "I will not leave you orphans. I will come back to you, and your heart will rejoice." And getting back to that question of what is the answer, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." To me, that is the ultimate answer. So I thank you for listening. And my book, The Growth of the Human Spirit, is available if you're interested. And you can contact me at I prefer you contact me at this email address. And I recommend my book for yourself or for someone you love. The price would be a small price, like I believe $9. So thank you for listening. And farewell.